What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country.
Hello and welcome to the Indy Day of Solidarity. I'm Angela Kane. We come to you from the site of the Kennedy King Memorial at the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Park near downtown Indianapolis. It's a landmark for peace featuring Dr. King and Senator Robert Kennedy, but the last few months and weeks in our nation have been anything but peaceful. They have been devastating for our health and for racial equality. COVID-19, a continuing threat, has taken tens of thousands of lives, mothers, brothers, sisters, daughters, and grandparents, hitting black and brown people hardest of all. And now, racial unrest is spilling into our nation's streets and across the world as 4 Minneapolis police officers face charges in the death of George Floyd, a black man. One officer placed his knee on Floyd's neck for nearly 9 minutes. As a mother, when I saw the video of George pleading for his life and crying out for his mom, I wept. It's a devastating exclamation point to additional recent deaths of African Americans at the hands of police and others. And it's a sobering reminder that systemic racism still exists in America, decades past the March for Civil Rights. But we see hope in the marches and the protests as people from every race, gender, ethnicity, and religion are uniting and proclaiming no more. They are taking action and demanding change. We have witnessed largely peaceful demonstrations in all 50 states, including in cities and rural communities that are predominantly white, as we did long ago during the marches with Dr. Martin Luther King. They are bringing to life again his powerful words, and I quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And in our community, we too are raising our voices. We declare today Indy Day of Solidarity. We want to demonstrate community support for elevating existing evidence-based solutions and seeking new solutions to address long-standing racial injustice in our institutions. Today, you will have the opportunity to hear from community leaders who will highlight our challenges and encourage you to get engaged in our We Stand Together initiative. But before we begin, let us reflect for a moment as we listen to a young man in our community share why we say Black Lives Matter.
When we say Black Lives Matter, we are not saying that only Black lives matter. We do understand that all lives matter, and we are not negating that fact. When we say Black Lives Matter, we are issuing a call for justice. We are issuing a plea to stop the murder of our children, who, as members of the human family, represent all of our children. And we wonder why we must call for justice if we live in a just society. We wonder why there should even be a reason for us to call for justice if we live in a just society. And we wonder why the blood of our children runs in the streets beneath the tainted shadow of racism. So next time you hear someone say Black Lives Matter, know that it is a call for justice. And think about why we need to call for justice if we do in fact live in a just society.
Next, we will hear from Dave Ricks, CEO of Eli Lilly and Company. Since Dave Ricks became CEO at Lilly in 2017, he has been known as a man of action. He has led fast, important efforts in the COVID crisis on testing and therapeutics, and he has pushed for greater diversity and inclusion within Lilly. But that's no longer enough. Lilly and our media partners feel a responsibility to lead and partner with others in the community to fight racial injustice and make this a better community for everyone.
I'm Dave Ricks, Lilly's chairman and CEO. At Lilly, we are outraged by the horrific events we've witnessed in recent weeks. We feel the pain these unjust actions have unleashed across our country, our state, and our city. And we grieve with the families and communities, including our own here in Indianapolis, who have been hurt by these events and the countless indignities that have come before, including the disproportionate and devastating impact of COVID-19. As a white man, I don't experience the impact of racism, let alone have to worry for my safety when interacting with the police. And I've never had to counsel my two sons on how to make others feel less threatened by their presence. But I have seen how systemic injustices affect my friends, my neighbors, and my colleagues at work. I'm listening and learning to better understand what a heavy toll that takes. So for me, for my family, and for our company, the time for words is now behind us. The time for urgent and concrete action is now. Today, Lilly emphatically affirms our commitment to create a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive culture within our organization and in the communities where we operate. As part of a company whose purpose it is to heal and to help people improve their lives, we at Lilly see clearly how social and economic injustices can lead to disparities in access to quality health care. This too must change. We commit to bring people and organizations together to acknowledge the trauma of racial injustice, understand its many forms, and create a call to action for lasting change. We'll join forces with businesses, faith communities, community partners, and government entities to support evidence-based approaches to solving these endemic problems. Specifically, Lilly intends to listen to Black-led groups and civil liberty organizations to provide assistance that matters to them. We will fund initiatives and actively advocate for policies which reduce violence and improve relations between law enforcement and minorities in Indianapolis. We will do more to close the opportunity gap for diverse employees in entry-level jobs and expand the use of our buying power to engage minority-owned businesses. In these efforts, we invite the whole of the Central Indiana business community to join us. We will continue working to understand the cause of and then reduce healthcare disparities in Indianapolis, because a person's zip code should never be the determining factor in their health. To underscore our commitment, we announced today our pledge of $25 million and 25,000 employee volunteer hours over 5 years. This funding will go toward fighting systemic racism and addressing its effects, largely in Indiana. Anthem too has pledged, and we hope other businesses will join us. Look, there's nothing easy about the road ahead. We understand that racial injustice is a foundational problem in this country and in our state, and that it won't be addressed just because we've showed up. Lilly is committed for the long haul, to stand together in solidarity until our community meets the standard we have set for our own company. We will press on until everyone, regardless of race or income, feels safe, feels heard, and feels respected. By joining together to eradicate systemic racism, we will strengthen the very fabric of our society and renew the promise of equal opportunity that America should hold for each and every one of us.
I stand for love.
I stand for justice and equity.
Vulnerable communities who don't have a voice.
Justice for all people.
Racial equality.
Justice for all, and that absolutely includes Black people.
This next speaker needs no formal introduction, as he is the mayor of Indianapolis, Joe Hogsett. Today, Mayor Hogsett will share the government's perspective, as well as the actions his office and others are taking to improve circumstances here in Indianapolis.
After demonstrations throughout Marion County, central Indiana, and indeed the world, one thing is clear. Many people are experiencing a lot of pain. We are in a moment that calls for unprecedented change surrounding institutional racism in America. It is incumbent on community leaders to heed this call in a way that is likewise unprecedented. That means more than just one season of action. It means broad coalitions of leaders in Indianapolis working to find permanent solutions. It means changing our own behavior, not just in public, but behind closed doors, in traditionally white spaces, like the boardroom, the courtroom, and the mayor's office. Today's Indy Day of Solidarity tells the whole community that major companies like Lilly, Cummins, Anthem, and soon others are here to provide real support for evidence-based solutions, solutions that will make our city a better home for historically underserved residents. That's why we as a city have made and continue to make bold, holistic criminal justice reforms. Reforms aimed not only at improving police and community relations, but also in finding ways to address mental health and substance abuse through treatment, not incarceration. And we must continue to address the ongoing legacies of the worst of government's actions, from the redlining that trapped Black residents in communities of poverty, to the unequal enforcement of laws between Black and white neighborhoods, to a history of underserved public schools. All have had one inevitable consequence. Residents of color have been excluded from many paths to prosperity. And so today we pledge to examine and correct systems that were not forged with racial equity under the law, to examine our own complicity today, and finally, to focus the power of some of our largest and oldest Hoosier corporations onto the largest and oldest problems. Though it is an Indy Day of Solidarity, we pledge our commitment to be that of a lifetime. I thank you.
I pledge to use my voice to advocate for those that have less than I do.
To do everything in my power to obtain justice for all people.
To continue to do my own work and examine my own racism.
I pledge to not give up.
Next, I would like to introduce City County Councilor Maggie Lewis. Lewis currently works as the Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Indianapolis. Lewis also served as the first woman president of the Indianapolis City County Council. Today, she will share how recent events have impacted our community.
Hi, I'm the wife, the mother, the daughter, the sister, the auntie, and friend of some amazing Black boys and men. I also have the honor of serving as CEO of an organization that serves over 80% Black and brown boys and girls. Like many in our community, I have struggled to comprehend what is happening in our city, our state, and our nation. I also have struggled with my emotions. At any given time, I find myself tired, exhausted, and fighting back the tears. I also feel guilty having a conversation about being Black in our community with my 13-year-old son and others. However, I know now more than ever, we must have this conversation about racism and race equity. I know that our kids need us. Our kids need us to guide and direct them and to be prepared to answer their hard questions. Also, I know our older youth need us to stand with them and to march with them for justice. At the end of the day, I know that together we can tackle racism. I know the conversation can be exhausting and uncomfortable, but we must get comfortable being uncomfortable. Again, together we can tackle racism. God bless.
I believe that we can eradicate the disease of racism.
I believe that everyone should be treated equally.
I believe in relationships, and I believe in our future.
That Black Lives Matter.
We're speaking up, speaking out, and working towards solutions to end the racism and inequalities that African Americans and other minorities have experienced for far too long. We stand together today, tomorrow, and well into the future.
Now I'm pleased to introduce Darrell Lockett. He has been our gracious host for today's Day of Solidarity at the beautiful Kennedy King Memorial Initiative, where he serves as Executive Director. Darrell is also an Indianapolis native who has been working for justice and peace for his entire career. We're glad to have him back home and pleased to have his insight today. Well, thank you for joining us, Daryl. What makes this conversation on race so different right now? Why are so many people of different races and ethnicities being moved to act?
Yeah, I think this has just been a interesting time, not only in the city, not only in the country, across the world. We're dealing with a global health pandemic. You know, we're talking about how, the coronavirus and COVID-19 has affected, communities differently. So, we're ever present to our differences as we were reminded about this on the news cycle and in the media. But then to see in front of us the death of someone happen in real time, just in the course of 8 minutes. And I think it's sort of, awakened us and, to this reality that so many individuals have lived under for generations. We can feel each other's pain. We know what it's like to be vulnerable. And I think that's what's really different about this moment. It's compelled individuals to act who have, historically been able to turn a blind eye. Now they realize that what impacts one of us impacts us all.
Daryl, just for a second, step outside of your work and your career. What is it like to be a black man in America right now and to watch what happened to George Floyd?
It's tough. Watching that video, watching those 8 minutes and 40 something seconds, I realized that could be me. That could be my older brother. That could be some of my closest friends. That could be, folks that I've grown up with. I'm walking and navigating a tightrope of sorts. That the margin for error is not the same as some of my friends in other communities. It's a burden that I feel on certain days, but then, redirect that into some level of activism, some, outlet of constructive, I have a young son, 2 years old, that I'm looking in his eyes, wanting to, instill that sense of hope. I have to ask myself, what can I do to be that change, to be that difference maker in this community?
What do you say to young African American men and young women, but men in particular, who say, I'm scared, this scares me?
I think there's something to this, sort of grief-filled activism thing. We look to, what the young leaders in Parkland, Florida have done. We look to, organizations like Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Those are some of the lowest moments in their life. And for, African American men watching another man die in front of you on repeat, on every news channel, that takes us to some of the darkest, lowest moments in our life. But, how can we then take that feeling that we feel?
Right.
And make space for it, honor it, respect it, acknowledge that it exists, but then turn that into something that will then, make the reality for someone else better, so that they don't have to feel this pain that we feel. How do we then, use that energy to cross some of those bridges that we've allowed to keep resources on one side of the community from traveling to another side of the community? Because that is the only way that we're going to make tomorrow brighter for the kids that are coming behind us.
It is really time for people to break down the stereotypes we have built around each other and truly get to know each other. That's what I hear you saying.
We have so much more in common than we have that we have allowed to separate us. When we realize that, when we acknowledge that, I have the same hopes, dreams for my children that you have for yours. When that is what we rally together around, we can accomplish it. We can make changes that we know need to come about in Central Indiana. If you're a poker player, you know that a 2-7 unpaired is one of the most difficult hands to possibly win with. It's probably the most impossible hand to win with. But you have some folks that are playing with a full house of opportunity.
Right.
They are flush with resources. We must make sure that we advocate for individuals who are coming from communities that have been historically disadvantaged and under-resourced, so that they can have a hand that is dealt to them, so that they can show the world they too can be some of the best poker players that we've ever seen.
And it's a question we all need to ask ourselves. What can we do? How can we be the change, as they say, that we need to be? It is life-changing for many of us. For the business community, what can they do to make a difference?
I think that the business community is in a very interesting space right now, because folks are living with this sense of vulnerability. We're more human now than we probably have ever been, because we're challenged on multiple sides. Well, how can the business community create a space for employees to bring their entire self to work? How can we then create space or hold space for them to wrestle with some of those questions with their colleagues that they spend oftentimes more time with than they do their own family?
Right.
It might be tough. It might bring up sort of emotions and vulnerabilities that we're not accustomed to sharing in a workspace. But ultimately, I think it'll bring us closer together. I think as well, this is an opportunity for the business community to look outwards, not just as consumers, but as members of the community, and see how they can export some of the resources that they have to really bring about a change in this world environment for their employees, their consumers, but their families and their children.
What do you see as the priorities for community organizations, some key steps they can put into place?
We can invest in community organizations. There's so many who've been on the ground for decades and hundreds of years here in central Indiana that are meeting the need on a daily basis. And, to each individual, find out what your personal passion is. There's no place that you're going to be a better servant than in the area of your passion. It's going to require a sort of collective impact approach where we come together listening to the needs of those who are, unheard, listening to them, listening to their hearts, listening to their passion, listening to their needs, and meeting them where they are.
Thank you, Daryl. It is so good to have you with us today. This has been incredible. What a day of solidarity. I don't know about you, but I am motivated and I am ready to see a change in our community. If you feel the same way, here are some things you can do. Wear black to symbolize the dark time we're living in with a pandemic that is affecting minorities disproportionately and recent acts of deadly violence against African Americans. Take time to read, think, and reflect on the kind of community you want and what you can learn or change to help us get there. You can be a part of the change you want to see. All of us can. Reach out to someone different from you. Ask questions to learn about each other's journey through life. How are you similar? And how have your experiences been different? Understanding each other opens our heart to new relationships and to healing. And speak out. Promote the Indy Day of Solidarity on your social media. Here's a suggested phrase to share. I stand in solidarity with the Black community in support of racial equality and justice. And now we will share insights from other community leaders and area residents about the crisis in our nation and their commitment to change.
I've had very complicated feelings about the events of the past few weeks.
I feel sad, frustrated,
pain and hurt,
rage, anger, frustration.
I found myself waking up one Saturday morning in tears.
I feel continued grief about the violence against Black and brown people in our country, particularly at the hands of law enforcement.
I think what happened with George Floyd is the straw that broke the camel's back.
But I have to say here recently, actually, I'm very hopeful.
I have been optimistic and I am optimistic.
I've been very enthusiastic and inspired by the numbers of people that have just stepped up in this moment to let their voice be heard.
When that many different people come together, there's more of an opportunity really to make that change.
You're seeing the protests that are taking place, the peaceful protests, are more diverse than any protests I've ever seen before. I hope and I pray that that speaks towards some unity that can come out of this.
I think the first thing everybody can do is say, I see you, and I'm going to use my voice, no matter what I look like, to make sure you aren't suffering.
We can't just say Black Lives Matter. We have to act it. We have to believe it. We have to actually do things that line up with that statement.
All of us have power and authority at some level, and all of us have power and authority to create equality and diversity opportunities.
We need to speak out against racism, and we need to vote.
We need to make sure that we keep our foot on the pedal and recognize where an individual's strong suits are in order to advocate for change.
People are starting to have difficult, uncomfortable conversations, myself included, in educating our peers and our family members.
The most important thing we can do is stand together in unity.
I am inspired by seeing so many people of different backgrounds and around the world come together and stand up against racism and against anti-Blackness.
When people stand with each other, and stand for each other, it spreads and encourages many, many people to do the same for other people that are in vulnerable situations.
I can see so many young people energized and excited and ready to use their voices to make a difference. And I can't think of anything more inspirational than young people stepping up and stepping into leadership positions and demanding that things have to change.
I'm inspired by the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who says, though we may have finite disappointment, we must never lose infinite hope.
Although an assassin's bullet muted the voices of Dr. Martin Luther King and Senator Robert F. Kennedy decades ago, let their courage and leadership inspire us to be the voices of a new generation, fighting for an inclusive society that treats everyone with dignity and respect. In the words of Dr. King, the time is always right to do what is right. Let us unite and do what is right. Thank you for joining us.
My dream is that we can all see each other, that we can see every part of each other.
We stand together.
I dream that my kids and my grandkids won't have to worry, won't be scared, can go where they want at any moment they want, and know they are loved.
We stand together.
I dream of a better life for my children and grandchild.
We stand together.
My dream is that African Americans, their lives can be valued. My dream is that all lives can be valued.
We stand together.
My dream would go back to my three fundamental values: faith, family, and service. I hope to do right by my faith and right by my family, and be as impactful as I can be by providing service. In a way that I can do that is, adding values to myself so that I can add values to others.
I dream that young Black men can feel as secure when they're pulled over for a speeding ticket as my sons will.
We stand together.
My dream is to exist in a world that believes, as much as I do, that Black lives matter.
We stand together.